Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the ECOMFIN webinar series at the ESSEC Business School, and I am Andrea Roncoroni, Director of the Center. Thank you for joining us for today's talk, and welcome to Sammi Tang. Sammi is an Associate Professor of Operations and Supply Chain Management at the Herbert Business School of the University of Miami. She received her BS from Peking University in China and an MS, BA, and her PhD from Washington University in St. Louis. Her research addresses issues related to supply chain risk management, outsourcing and procurement strategies, sustainable supply chains, and various topics in the interface of operations and marketing. She published in top academic journals, including Manufacturing and Service Operations Management, Production and Operations Management, and Journal of Marketing Research. Sammi serves as the Senior Editor for Productions and Operations Management and an Associate Editor for Decision Sciences. And today, she is presenting a paper on flexibility value of reshoring capacity under import cost uncertainty and domestic competition. Thank you again for joining us, Sammi, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, and good evening to everyone in Paris. First of all, I want to thank Professor Andre Roncoroni for the kind invitation. It's an honor and my great pleasure to present in this webinar series. So today I want to talk about this recent research I did on reshoring capacity. This is a joint work with Panos Kouvalis and his former doctoral student Xiao Tan from Washington University in St. Louis. So, reshoring is not a new trend. Companies have been talking about this for quite some time. But in the last 5-6 years, it really has gained much more attention because of the geopolitical tension between the U.S. and other regions, because of the increased risk in the global supply chain, as well as a series of industrial policies announced by the government. Let me use the solar panel industry as an example. Okay, so historically, China has been a big player, actually a dominant player in the global solar manufacturing industry. The cost of producing solar panels in China has been much lower than the costs of production in the US for several reasons. Of course, the labor cost there is lower, but the industry there has really got a lot of support from the Chinese government, which helps the industry to gain the skills. And as the industry pick up the skills, the efficiency goes up, and that helps bring down the cost. So to help protect the domestic solar manufacturers here, going back to the Obama administration, the U.S. Started to impose tariffs on Chinese-made solar panels. The intention was to make the imported solar panels from China more expensive, to create leveling playing field for the domestic manufacturers, and therefore to boost the manufacturing activities here. Now, 6 years later, the Trump administration further raised the tariffs on solar panel cells and modules from China. It started at 30% in 2018, first year, and it drops to 15% in the fourth year, gradually it dropped to that level. But after that, in 2022, the Biden administration actually decided to temporarily ease the tariff because there has been a strong demand for solar panel installation from domestic energy developers in a greater effort to address the climate change. So, the temporary lift on the tariffs help these developers to, meet the increasing demand and to help the nation speed up the transition to clean energy. Despite of this, there's no intention to completely get rid of these tariffs. In fact, some domestic solar manufacturers are actually urging the US government to get tough on trade because they see that the production cost in China has plummeted to record low, and it's hard to compete with that cost. So clearly, there are significant uncertainties around what tariff rate will be imposed in the future, and which state will be targeted by these tariffs. So right now, most of these solar tariffs are at the solar cell and solar module level. But as the industry develop, it's hard to say whether it will expand the tariff to the component level and raw material level, like what the Trump tariff policy did to other industries. Now, in addition to these, trade policies, the U.S. government has also announced a series of industrial policies that have also affected the solar industry. One of them is the Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed into law by the current president in 2022. So the act provides, further support for the domestic solar manufacturing in several ways. For example, if manufacturer plans to build new solar facilities here, they can directly apply to apply for government fund. Also, the act offers manufacturing production tax credit for domestically produced solar panels. Say, in the U.S., the production cost is right now is around 40 cents per watt to produce the solar panel and solar cells. So in this case, the government may shoulder 3 to 5 cents out of that 40 cents. So essentially, it helps to bring down the manufacturing cost, at least in the short term. In addition, the act provides tax credit to end users for consumption of those domestically sourced and produced solar panels. So this, increase the domestic demand, and hopefully this will attract more investment here. Now, as expected, the industry has responded positively. We see increased investment by both domestic manufacturers and global companies. For example, First Solar, U.S. Solar manufacturers has added 1.2 billion investment in the domestic manufacturing after this Inflation Reduction Act has been announced. Bring its total investment in the U.S. to approximately $4 billion, which is a lot. And another company, Maxion, this is a Singapore-based solar company. Among several other global companies, they decided to reshore to the U.S. In this case, with a $1 billion new plant in New Mexico. So this, global companies, they used to serve the U.S. market using their production facilities outside of the U.S., can be in their home country or other regions. But now with the increased tariffs, they see that it becomes more expensive to bring those products into the U.S. market. And because all these, lucrative incentives provided by the U.S. government, this company started to see a reason to start building the capacities here in the U.S. Now, in the past, companies that have reshored benefited from the fact that they are now closer to the market, they have shorter lead time, they can quickly respond to the market changes. Product quality can be higher, and for U.S. companies that reshore, they produce local jobs, they bring jobs back. But in the past few years, many changes and uncertainties as global companies are reassessing their global supply chains, and many are considering to kind of reconfigure their global network. Companies realize that adding an onshore or nearshore production location to their existing offshore location has this additional benefit, which is risk diversification. So it helps diversify the risk of operating their global supply chain. For example, Cisco started to build a nearshore facility in Mexico, starting in 2016. So they have a reasonably distributed supply chain, and this gives the company the flexibility to move their production around. And as a result, when the tariff hits, the impact of those tariff policies was quite minimal on Cisco. So this kind of real option value of the reshoring capacity or nearshore capacity has been undervalued in our community, and we decided to take a closer look in this study. In our field, many works have been done with regard to operational planning in the face of market demand uncertainty. So companies know how to plan for example, their production or inventory in the face of market demand uncertainty. Now, with that decision done, global companies realize that they also have to deal with the uncertainty in the cost of delivering those planned quantity to the market, right? So in this study, we will see that a reasonably distributed supply chain will, allow global firms to kind of rebalance their global supply chain when the short-term cost disturbance of delivering those quantities to the market, happens to their operation. So this industry observations and motivations lead us to the following questions we want to answer in this study. First, how much reshoring capacity should the global firm invest in? Now, for companies that used to serve the US market through their offshore location, this reshoring decision is not all or nothing decision, meaning that it's not bring everything back or bring nothing back kind of decision. So really, we want to look at the level of the reshoring investment. Second, we want to know how the underlying cost uncertainty due to trade policies affect the global firms' reshoring investment and profitability in serving the domestic market. And also, we want to understand how the competitive environment in the domestic market affect the level of reshoring investment, and whether or not the trade and industrial policies always achieve the intention of benefiting the domestic manufacturers. Now, very briefly about some related literature. So our work is closely related to the global network configuration literature, especially those that look at production facility location, and the sourcing strategy decisions, especially in the global context. But most of this literature focuses on a single firm and uncertainty that arise on the demand side. There are a few papers that look at supply side uncertainty, like random yield, production costs, uncertainty, or exchange rate. Now, this literature, suggests that imposing tariffs will lead to a higher inbound transshipment cost of bring things to the local market, to the home market. Therefore, tariff will favor reshoring. So in this study, we will show slightly different results, as you will see, and also we account for some uncertainty from both the demand side as well as the supply side. We look at the cost uncertainty due to those policies, and unlike the exchange rate or production cost uncertainty, which affect either the raw material or the finished goods cost. Here we consider, tariffs on both levels, and also we consider competition between the global firms and the local competitors, and we consider responsive pricing. Our study is also closely related to the economics and OM literature on tax and tariff policies. Now, very briefly, the economics literature on the impact of tariffs mostly look at this at the macroeconomy level. Now, the OM literature does include some operational details like supply chain structure, capacity, and reshoring decision and location, things like this. But this literature mostly assumes that the tariff rate is deterministic, and the reshoring decision is like all or nothing, like I mentioned before. You either reshore or don't reshore. So in this study, we explicitly model the level of the reshoring investment, and we allow uncertainty around the tariffs, and we consider tariff at different stages of the supply chain. Okay, so now let me introduce the model. So we consider two countries. Country C, like China, low cost tariff exposed country. Or country U, this is like US, like home market, home country, or a region where the tariff policy don't apply. So our model also includes, not only include onshore or reshore, but also include nearshore, like Mexico or Canada, where the tariff policies don't apply to the product we brought in from those countries. To produce 1 unit of finished product, we assume it requires 1 unit of input, and the input cost is WC in country C and WU in country U. And they assume the cost is cheaper in China in this case. We consider the tariffs on both raw material level and the finished goods level. So TR is for the raw material tariff, TF is the finished goods tariff, and we assume both are random. Now we consider a global firm that currently, serve its home market, like in country U, it's their home market. So currently the global firm serves the market in country U using its offshore location in country C. But the global firm is considering to, invest in reshoring capacities, right? So with this capacities in the 2 locations, the global firm has different options to run its operation, right? So in this case, it has 3 options. It can continue to use its current offshore location, so offshore sourcing and production. In this case, any product brought back will be subject to the finished goods tariff. And in addition to this, the global firm can also choose to produce domestically using the raw materials imported from country C. So in this case, it's onshore production and offshore sourcing. So we denote the quantity to be QUC. In this case, any raw material brought into country U will be subject to tariff TR, the raw material tariff. And we normalize, in this case, we normalize the final assembly cost in country C, the low cost country, to be 0. And we assume that the labor cost or assembly cost in country U is higher. So there's a delta cost term there. And finally, the global firm can choose to produce domestically using local input. So it's onshore sourcing and production, and quantity QUU. So in this case, no tariffs apply because we do everything here. So the cost is the input cost WU from local market and the assembly cost. And we assume that the global firm faces a linear inverse demand function, where the market size epsilon is assumed to be random. And the global firm may also face competition in the domestic market. So there's a domestic competitor we call firm L in country U. In that case, the output price will be, market price will be determined by the total output from the 2 companies. So we basically consider connote competition here. And we assume that in their current facility, so in the global firm's offshore facility and the local firms, domestic facility, they don't face any capacity constraints. So in the past, they have achieved, enough scales in their operation. Now, with the option of reshore, the global firm now faces a series of decisions, right? So in stage 1, we model this as this 3-stage game. in stage one, the global firm makes a long-term capacity decision, which is quite standard in the OM literature. We model the capacity decision as long-term. So in this case, the global firm decide how many reshoring capacity KU to build. And then in stage two, after the market size realized, so for example, when the near-term demand forecast is given, both firms decide on their output quantities. They engage in quantitative competition. And then in stage three, the global firm will decide its production allocation in its global network. After all the short-term cost disturbance happens, right? So after, in this case, the tariff realized, it decides where to produce, how many to produce in each facility. So those three quantities. So we formulate this three-stage model in this using a stochastic program. So in this case, very quickly in stage one, the global firm decides this capacity size KU to maximize its expected profit, which includes the long-term average profit over all the possible, market conditions, and minus the initial investment cost in the capacity. And then in stage two, the two firms engage in competition. So the domestic competitor decide on its quantity QL using its local, production facility, and the global firm decide on its output quantity Q, where the last term basically represents the cost, the expected cost of delivering that quantity Q to the market, which is solved from the stage three allocation problem. So in stage three, the global firm will decide on this allocation, the three quantities, in using different options I talked about earlier, to fulfill its output target. Any questions so far? Great. Okay, so let me talk about the optimal solution. So we,
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly.
Go ahead, please.
How do the three program combine?
So basically, the stage one, in stage one, this term, the revenue term is from the so it's expressed as expected value of the is realized revenue for a given market realization, right? So this term is actually given from stage two, because in order to calculate the revenue, you need to do, or in this case, not just revenue, the profit, right? The two firms compete. That will give the global firm its profit from here, right? So this is for a given market size. This is the global firm's profit. So we take expectation of this in stage one when deciding the capacity, because capacity is a long term. It's like 5-10 years decision, right? So at this time, you don't know the market realization. So you market conditions and take expectations out of them. And then from stage two, if you look at the global firm, it has this cost term. So that's the cost of delivering that quantity I mentioned earlier. So this cost is actually calculated from stage three. Right. So this basically the global firm has different options of producing for that quantity, and it will choose whichever is the cheapest one. Okay. Right from here.
Thank you.
So we solve this three-stage game backwards, the standard way to do this. Starting from the stage three, the optimal sourcing and production decision for a given capacity size, output quantity, market size, and tariff realization or cost realization is basically characterized in this figure using the three regions based on the cost comparisons. So this basically says that when both tariffs are high, then it makes sense for the company to just do everything domestically. So it's onshore sourcing and production, right? And when the finished goods tariff are really high, the global firm will want to produce locally in the US. But so in this case, when the raw material tariff is low, then the global firm would like to produce using the imported raw material, but not the domestically sourced raw material. So Felix, so
yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Just a short question on the modeling, the KU, the capacity that is built for reshoring, that is built only for the final production stage and not for the intermediate component production. So I mean, the KU, you build capacity for the final assembly, right? There's no capacity building for the component production.
Right, but when the firm making the output decision, it has to take into account this capacity limit.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to consider the capacity limit. Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Right. So I'm talking about the three different regions, right? So this is domestically sourcing and production. This is where when the finished goods tariff is high and raw material tariff is low, then the firm will want to produce domestically using imported raw material. And when the finished goods tariff is relatively low, then it makes sense to just produce and source and produce offshore, right? Now, the optimal output quantity decision at stage 2 is characterized by this piecewise linear function. So basically, it means that the firm would like to set a higher output quantity as the market's demand grows. That's basically what it means, except for this intermediate range, right? So we define this 2 thresholds. We call it full utilization threshold and overflow threshold. It will become clear what does it mean in a moment. So we define this using these 2 cost variables, MA and MB. So MA basically denotes the cost of producing 1 unit of output when optimally using the global network. Whichever cost or option is lower, they're going to use that option. And MB basically denotes the expected cost of producing 1 unit when offshore. So this basically says that when demand is within this range, this intermediate range, the global firm in this case, will set its output quantity, at this level. So when demand increases, it doesn't increase its output. It will keep the output at this capacity level, KU. And the reason is because if the global firm were to increase its output as the demand increases, it would like to increase the output. But if they are going to increase the output, it means the firm has to overflow some production to the offshore location because it doesn't have enough capacity there. But we know that from here, the definition MB, the offshoring cost, is more expensive than the optimal cost MA. So because it's more expensive, when demand is, only incrementally increases, then the firm will find it's not worthwhile to go to the offshore location. So only when the demand is significantly high, much higher, then it makes sense for the company to go to the offshore location to make up those, remaining quantities. So that's why we define this as, full utilization, where it reaches its full capacity utilization. And overflow threshold is where the firm started to overflow to the offshore location. So back to stage 1, the optimal reshoring decision is characterized by this threshold policy, where it means that when the unit capacity cost, the CU is the unit capacity cost, is above this threshold, it's not worthwhile to reshore. It's not profitable. And in this range, when it's lower than the reshoring investment or capacity, is characterized by this first order condition. So that's the single firm model. For the competition model, actually the analysis is is quite similar, and the structural result is also similar. But one thing I find interesting, I want to kind of bring out, is this second stage equilibrium, the output quantity equilibrium in the clone competition. So here, the the black line represents the global firm's equilibrium output quantity, and the blue line represents the competitors' equilibrium quantity, the domestic competitors' equilibrium quantity. So this figure basically clearly shows how the flexibility in the sourcing and production provides the global firm an advantage over the domestic competitor. Because in this, as you can see, in this intermediate range, when demand is in this range, only the global firm will find production profitable, only its output, and the domestic competitor stays out of the market. So that sourcing and production flexibility I mentioned earlier gives this global firm this this benefit that a domestic competitor doesn't have. So the global firm becomes more competitive than its competitor, so it has the upper hand. So in this case, so basically it's start to enter the market earlier than the competitor. Now, this optimal solution allows us to look at the tariff impact first on the reshoring capacity. So how does the tariff, impact the reshoring investment? We show that the two tariffs, the raw material tariff and finished goods tariff, have quite different impact. The raw material tariff, as we increase the raw material tariff, we show that it tends to dampen the reshoring incentive. So it always decreases the reshoring investment, KU, both the reshoring threshold and the optimal capacity level. And this is quite straightforward because, the increase in the raw material will make the onshore production more expensive, especially when the onshore production, domestic production, uses the imported raw material. And this finding is consistent with the evidence we see that there has been a slowdown in certain industries, slowdown in the reshoring activities in certain industries here in the US. Where the tariffs have big impact on the raw materials and components used in the production, like in the bicycle industry. Also, during 2020 and 2021, we saw a slowdown in building solar assembly capacity by the energy developers here in the US. So what happened during that period was that the Commerce Department started an investigation on the allegation that some Chinese producers were illegally dodging the solar tariffs by routing their components through other Asian countries, and they did only minor processing in those countries. Because the US energy developers, they anticipate if those allegations were found to be true, then there might be tariffs imposed for solar panels, sourced from those other Asian countries as well. And at that time, 3/4 of the imported solar panels are from those other Asian countries. So in anticipation of those possible tariffs, there's a slowdown or delay of building capacities from those energy developers. So this also provides support to this finding. Now, regarding the finished goods tariff, you might expect that a higher finished good tariff will encourage reshoring because, as you charge higher tariff for the import, the finished goods, then it makes offshore production more expensive than you like to produce here, right? And we find that it's not always the case. So as you increase the finished good tariff, yes, it will increase MB, the offshoring costs, which will encourage more reshoring. But at the same time, it will increase the other cost, the MA, and we find that a higher MA will lead to a higher, basically means that the cost of outputting to the market becomes higher. And this will make the firm output less, and which reduces the capacity need. So this becomes more clear if we look at the expected production costs I defined earlier, right? The cost of output or delivering to the market of this quantity Q. So as you can see, when the market demand is above this full utilization threshold, the company is paying this cost MA for anything produced up to this level KU, and is paying this MB for anything beyond that. So this is called overflow quantity, right? So apparently an increase in MAs, as we increase TF, it will lead to higher MA, and higher MA will make this first cost term higher. So that will dampen the incentive of investing in the KU. But if we decrease KU, it means that we have to overflow more quantities, right? And if this MB increase, it means we have to pay a higher overflow cost. So as we increase MB, as we see a higher MB, it actually encourages the company to invest in the KU, to bring more domestic capacity so that they can overflow less. So these two effects, which we defined as the overflow effect for MB associated with MB and output quantity effect associated with MA, they work in opposite ways, opposite directions. So whether the increase in the finished good tariff will lead to more or less reshoring capacity depend on which of these two effects dominate. If the overflow effect dominates, then the higher finished good tariff will increase the reshoring investment. But if the output quantity dominates, then the effect dominates, then the reshoring investment actually will decrease. And in a special case where these two are positively correlated and have a very simple distribution, we can actually express this condition in terms of the tariff level, the mean level. So it basically says that when the tariff rate is low, the reshoring capacity will increase as we increase the tariff. So in this case, because when tariff is low, the KU, there's not a lot of investment in the reshoring capacity. If KU is low, it will flow a lot. So the overflow effect dominates. In this case, the tariff policy actually will lead to more reshoring capacity. So it helps, boost reshoring investment in this case. But when the tariff rate is already high, when mu is greater than threshold, in this case, we expect the firm is already invested in certain level of reshoring capacity, so the KU is already at some high level. So in this case, the company is not overflowing a lot, and at the same time, because when you increase the tariff, the average production cost, which is the MA, basically MA here, okay, becomes higher. So now the MA effect, the output quantity effect, dominates the overflow effect. In this case, it will actually decrease the reshoring investment. So in other words, as the tariff policy, already at a high level, as the tariff rate is already at a high level, further increasing the tariff rate may no longer, help boosting the domestic manufacturing. Yes, go ahead, please, Alex.
Yeah, sorry for asking all the questions. I was just wondering the output, if you're in this output quantity effect, which is very interesting, is if you look at the sum of the national production in the US, so the competition plus the global manufacturer, then that also decreases the sum of both, or is it that then if they in the output quantity effect they reduce their reshoring capacity, but then the national competitors produce more?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I will talk about the output effect in the next slide. So right now I'm focusing on the impact of tariff on the capacity and investment of capacity. So following Felix's question, next we look at how the tariff affects the expected output, right? So we show that the raw material effect is actually quite straightforward like before. So when we increase the raw material tariff, it always decreases the global firm's output. And in this case, the domestic competitor can take advantage and output more. A recent study actually done by the US ITC, the United States International Trade Commission, they actually found that the Section 232 tariffs on imported steel and aluminum actually have negatively affected the downstream industries, which depend on these raw materials. So they found that domestic production decreased by about 0.6% per year on average in those industries, so which is consistent with what we proved here. And it's more interesting for the finished goods tariff in terms of the impact on the output. The result is similar to raw material tariff if it's a single firm without competition. So basically, still the global firm will decrease the expected output, and the competitor will output more. And this is true also in the competition model when this ratio is high. So basically, when the output quantity effect dominate. So Phoenix, I don't know if this answers your earlier question, right? So when the output quantity effect dominate, the global firm will decrease its reshoring capacity investment, decrease its expected output, but at the same time, the domestic competitor will benefit, will output more. What's interesting here is that here you see that the facing competition, actually the global firm may behave more aggressively, and this is again because this sourcing and production flexibility give the global firm the advantage over its competitor. So in this case, as you can see, the global firm may decide to output more. And of course, because it has the upper hand, the competitor in response, in this case, has is at a disadvantaged position, so it outputs less. And actually, the increase in the global firm's outputs can offset or even dominate, in this case, the decrease in the competitor's output, and actually lead to a higher total industry output in this case. Now, we also look at how does the tariff affect the different firms' profit. So we see that both the raw material tariff and the finished goods tariff will always hurt the global firms' profit. So global firms' profit always decrease regardless of which tariff are there, right? Increasing mu R or mu F always lead to a lower global firm's profit. But the local competitor's profit is different here. Even though the local competitor is not directly subject to the tariff, we see that the tariff actually can impact the local firm, the local competitor, through the market competition. And actually, going back to the solar industry, remember a lot of domestic, solar manufacturers are trying to urge the government to impose, get tough on tariff policies, impose high tariff rate. And we see that actually in certain cases, imposing tariffs or increasing tariffs may not always benefit domestic firms. In this case, as the global firm, is aggressively invest in the reshoring capacity, in this case, actually the domestic competitors can get hurt. So this is something I think some companies should keep in mind, because it's not only just the tariffs. For example, it depending on which type of tariff we are talking about. If it's raw material tariff, yes, it will benefit the local competitor. But if it's finished goods tariff, then it depends, right? So it depending on the competitive environment. And so because both tariffs, I mentioned earlier, both tariffs will hurt the global firm's profit. So a natural question to ask is which type of tariff will have a more severe negative impact on the global firm? So we illustrate one example here where both tariffs have the same initial distribution, and the orange line here, orange dots here, represent the case where the finished goods tariff increases, and the blue dots here represent the case where the raw material tariff increased by the same amount. So we see that when we increase the tariff by the same amount, the finished goods tariff tend to have a more severe negative impact. So it leads to more profit loss for the global firm, right? So this is finished goods. And the reason is because, even though an increase in the TR and TF will impact the MA similarly. So it doesn't matter if you increase the raw material you brought in or the finished goods you brought in, it will increase your expected production cost, yes? However, the finished goods tariff will have additional impact because whenever the company is overflowing any output or any production to the offshore location, only the finished goods tariff will have an impact. The raw material tariff will have no impact on those overflow activities. So that explains why the finished goods tariff tend to have a bigger impact, in this case, negative impact on the profit. Now, about the competition, how the competition affect the reshoring activities. So to answer this question, we compare the single firm model and the competition model. So first, we see that we compare the reshoring threshold. So reshoring threshold basically defines when it becomes profitable for the company to reshore. And we show that the reshoring threshold is lower under competition. So we call that when the cost is above the reshoring threshold, reshoring is not feasible, it's not profitable. It only becomes feasible when it's below the threshold. So lower threshold basically means that in this case, reshoring is weakly, the feasibility region for reshoring is weakly smaller under competition. So if we look at this, when the input cost in the US is relatively high, there's no difference in terms of the reshoring threshold, they're the same. But when the input cost in the US is getting smaller, so when its efficiency improves, when the domestic production efficiency improves, now we see that in this case, the reshoring threshold is strictly lower. So the COD is strictly less than COM. And the reason is because the fact that when the global firm is considering reshoring, when facing competition in the domestic market, and that market is competitive. So, the domestic competitors in that market is very, in this case, has a low cost, right? So it faces, if the global firm is going to enter or reshore in the US, it will face very intense competition here. So that's why it dampens their incentive to reshore. Now, a lower reshoring threshold doesn't necessarily mean that the investment will be lower. In fact, we show that when the input cost in the US is relatively high, in this case, the global firm will invest more in the reshoring capacity when facing competition. Okay. So in this case, what happens is when the domestic cost is relatively high, the global firm really has that advantage because it has that flexibility. If we look at this expression, it basically says that when the competitor is not in the market, then basically that's the global firm behaves the same as before, has the same marginal revenue. But when there is competition, facing competition, when your competitor is less competitive, then the global firm, in this case, will have a higher marginal revenue compared to a single firm case. So the second term, the marginal revenue is higher. And the last term is where the firms will overflow. In this case, the marginal revenue is the same. It doesn't matter if it faces competition or not. So if you increase the capacity, the reshoring capacity by 1 unit, it allows you to save on the offshoring cost, and you save basically this much. Previously, you're paying the offshoring cost. Now you're only paying this cost. So the last term on the global firm, there's no difference in terms of incentive reshoring. But in the second term, definitely the global firm sees more incentive to reshore. So because the marginal revenue is higher, it will you set a higher reshoring capacity here. Now we illustrate this comparison results using the uniform demand because it becomes more clear. So here the horizontal axis is the domestic input cost, and the blue line represents the reshoring capacity with no competition, and the orange line is with competition. So here we see that when the domestic input cost is relatively low, we show that not only the reshoring threshold is lower, but also the reshoring capacity investment is also lower. Okay, so under competition, the capacity, this orange line stays below the blue line, so the capacity level is lower when under competition. So again, this is due to when the input cost is relatively high, previously we proved that there's a region where we see the global firm will invest more facing competition. And in the special case of uniform demand, we actually proved the same result for a larger region. So we generalized that result to a larger region. And what's also interesting to point out is that in these green circled regions, we see that as we decrease the capacity cost, so the horizontal axis in each panel is the capacity cost. So in these regions, as we decrease the capacity cost, yes, it will kind of encourage more reshoring, so the capacity will go up. But we see that as we decrease the CU, for example, like the government support given by the Inflation Reduction Act, so they help the company to shoulder some of the facility costs that decrease the CU. But as they decrease the CU, we see that it leads to a smaller increase in the capacity when there's intense competition. In other words, this kind of government support is less helpful in boosting domestic manufacturing when the industry competition is intense, right? And in this, blue circled regions, this is where the government support will become more helpful in a competitive environment. So as we decrease CU, in this case, CU is at a relatively high level, right? So the capacity is kind of low. Capacity investment is at a relatively low level. As the government is helping to bring down the CU, it will lead to more reshoring. But we see that when facing competition, the global firm is more likely to increase its capacity more, or reshoring capacity more. And the reason is because facing competition, especially when the capacity is low, it has to overflow to the offshore location. And in this case, if it increase the investment in KU in the reshoring capacity, it will allow the global firm to stay more competitive or to compete with the competitor better without using the more costly option of going to the offshore. So that's why it has more incentive to quickly build up the capacity in the domestic country. So yeah, that's what's basically what I have for this study. So in short, in this study, we show that we look at the impact of tariffs. We think about imposing tariff policies. We really have to think about what type of tariff policy are we talking about, right? So we show that what raw material level tariff tend to lead to less reshoring, and finished goods tariff may either increase or decrease reshoring, depending on which effect we defined dominate. And we show that domestic competition may induce more reshoring. And also in terms of the impact on the domestic manufacturer, we see that they may benefit or they may get hurt depending on, again, the competitive environment, as well as which type of tariffs are there. So thank you for coming to this webinar, and I'm open up for questions.
Thank you, Sammi. Anyone wishes to make a question on Sammi's presentation?
Yes, go ahead, please. Oh, Felix, thank you.
Felix, you want to make a... no, okay. So I just have a question. Actually, tariff is a major reason why companies might be willing to reshore, right? But there are actually other reasons that might entail a reshoring incentive.
Mm-hmm.
So have you thought about any other reason that might be embedded, maybe not in this paper, but in a future paper? I have, for instance, a change in the reliability, which might be driven by a shock. It's something that I'm currently studying, and I presented last year in St. Louis, but from a different perspective. We didn't have competition and so on. But my question is, do you think that it's possible to embed a further reason for reshoring in this very interesting competitive model?
Right. So like what I mentioned earlier on this slide, in the past, in the reshoring literature, some researchers have looked at the benefits of reshoring, like, now if you bring things back, you can, you have shorter lead time. So now you may have better demand forecast for you to quickly respond to the market, right? And also, in terms of the reliability, when you reshore, you are getting things closer, so you don't have to deal with that very long logistic, that long transportation way of getting things to your market, right? So that is also decreasing the risk. But in this paper, we mainly focus on that flexibility value. So we try to kind of isolate the other benefits. Some of them mentioned here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
But then, sorry, just the follow-up question. In that sense, do you think the other factors here on that slide, they would reinforce the insights that you have found, or they would rather dampen them? So, for example, the lead time effect, would that rather strengthen the effectiveness of the policies or not?
Yeah. Thank you. So I think all this benefit are listed on this slide. They argue for reshoring, right? So it means reshoring is good. You're closer to market, you can do better, quality is higher, things like that. And now in this paper, we provide another perspective, saying that, okay, if you reshore, that gives you the opportunity to kind of rebalance your production or facility, right, in different locations.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, we just want to provide this different perspective to the reshoring trend.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is the paper available for reading, or?
Yeah, so it's right now it's under revision. So we are revising some of the results. Yeah, but yeah, the working paper is available.
Okay, okay, great. Thank you, Sammi. Thanks to all the participants, to those who made a question or those who just attended. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And okay, I'll say you goodbye. And the next webinar will take place on Tuesday, February 20th at 9 p.m. Paris time zone again, because Michael Wagner from the University of Washington, very far from here, in the US, on the West Coast, is presenting a paper on data-driven profit estimation error in the news vendor model. Again, thank you, and good night for those who are here.
Yeah.
Good morning for those who are attending us in China, and good evening for those who are in the US time zone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending.